Hi guys, I hope you're doing well this week. Setting you up. Hi guys, I hope you're doing well this week. Welcome to another episode of British Literature Online. Whoa, we only have a couple more weeks left. Woohoo! I mean, I'm like pretty stoked about it. So in our last couple weeks, like I mentioned, we are going to be talking about detective literature. So the trajectory will look like this. This will be your consumption week. You are going to be reading and watching a little bit of detective literature. So I'll tell you a little bit about the story you'll be reading, and then the show is actually up to you. You're going to choose one of the four greatest greatest detectives ever created by 3 authors. That's why I got confused for a second. So I'll give you some options, and then next week you're going to start working on character development, so we'll have some exercises with that, and then the week after that you're going to write an outline and a small section of a story. So we won't actually probably end up creating a whole entire detective story, but you actually are going to plan the murder, the mystery, how it gets solved, all that with the detective that you create. So it should be fun, just a chance for you to get some hands-on work with a detective. And that kind of storytelling, suspense writing, and murder mysteries. We haven't done that much with it. It's similar to the Gothic stuff, so especially if you think back to Dorian Gray, some of those scenes where Dorian was like being chased around the house. No, what am I saying? When Dorian is murdering Basil. I don't think there's ever a scene where Dorian's chased around a house. Well, no, not even James Vane. He doesn't chase him, he just scares him. Point being, we haven't really done that much with mystery, so let's get to it. This video will be a very brief lecture of me telling you a little bit about detective literature, specifically kind of what content is out there. I'm linking, or in fact I've already linked a more specific lecture into the playlist that I have all these videos on YouTube. You don't have to watch it. It's about 30 minutes long, but it will go into even more specific detail. I have to keep these videos under 15 minutes, just for some reason. I don't know why my YouTube won't let me upload longer. So let's get started. I'll give you an overview. If you want more information, that lecture is there. The guy is probably a million times more knowledgeable than me, so you can enjoy his wisdom. The beauty of the internet gives us access to people who really know, experts in the field of literature. So let's get to it. Oh, the other thing that I want to mention is you guys voted for an additional vernacular list, so it's there. It is uploaded. It's a great list. In fact, we're going to use it when we're talking a little bit more about characterization. There's some great words for that in particular. So look that over this week, find those definitions, and then next week we'll actually use them a little bit more. So yeah, that's all I got. Couple more weeks, guys. Hang in there, and now let's talk about detectives. Okay, so we are actually going to start off with a couple of vocabulary words or concepts that are mingled in with this topic. So the first word is called ratiocination, and this is essentially the process of thinking that a detective kind of goes through. It's like, for example, when Sherlock is doing all his crazy calculating. That's what it is. A whodunit is exactly what it sounds like. Who did it? Who murdered them? Who committed the crime? This is what happens when we have a question that we need answered, and that's revealed at the end of the mystery. Next, we have an armchair detective. So this is someone who solves the mystery from the sidelines. So this is someone who's not like a police detective who goes to the scene and is like checking the blood and stuff, but rather they read about it and then that's how they put together what is going on. And then last but not least, our hard-boiled fiction. This is almost wholly an American thing, though actually I've seen how it's been retransferred back to British culture a little bit over the years. Same with some of these Scandinavian detectives. They've adopted it. And so a hard-boiled detective is someone who's really quite gritty. It is not a light story. It's dark. It's touching on topics that are really rather intense. So you might think about like Law and Order, CSI, or something like that. Okay, so now that we have a little bit of vernacular, wink, to talk about detective literature, or to start thinking about it, we're going to take a look at the origins. So you are all probably familiar with Edgar Allan Poe, or at least you should be. So your homework this week will actually be to return to your American Studies roots and read an Edgar Allan Poe story. So yes, I know this is a British literature class, but detective literature cannot even begin to be discussed if we don't look at Edgar Allan Poe's detective, Augustin Dupin, who is a Parisian detective. He's from France, and he is essentially the first person that uses this ratiocination process of kind of figuring out a crime. And so what you will read as your homework this week is a story called The Murders in the Rue Morgue. And this is what we can say is maybe the first piece of detective literature or modern detective literature ever written. So we have a detective, we have a murder, and we have an incredible plot twist at the end that all pulls together. I won't spoil the story for you, but it's quite a shock. And it inspired everyone from Arthur Conan Doyle, the guy that wrote Sherlock Holmes, to many other writers up until now. We're just going to talk about setting for a second because when it comes to British detective literature, there's essentially just two places that these things take place. So the most typical setting is often in this Victorian environment, in a Victorian city environment. That's part of the reason Sherlock Holmes has stayed in our memories for so long, is it's just a very vivid and kind of dark and foggy and spooky place. And so it's a really excellent environment to write murder mystery. Whereas the other location would be in the British countryside. So if you're looking at this picture, it looks really nice. It's kind of sweet. It's become popular to start writing stories for this environment. And part of the reason is just the shock value. The small town, the nice people, and in fact, there's a lot more evil going on in the situation. And so that kind of entices the reader. It makes it more compelling in the storytelling. Okay, now on to the very exciting part. We have our four detectives here. There's Sherlock Holmes, who's whip smart. He's a drug addict. He's really hard to get along with and frustrating, but he's a genius. We have Hercule Poirot, who is clever, he's odd, very particular, likes things his own way, and is very international. We have Miss Marple, who is just this startling old lady, but she has a little bit of an edge, and she uses her circle of gossip and friends to help her solve mysteries. And then we have Father Brown. Unexpectedly, a genius detective, despite being or having the appearance of just kind of a nice, sweet priest. And so all of these characters are incredibly compelling, and that's actually what has made their franchises so successful. There's a lot of things that we could say have made them successful. Part of it could be like the slow releasing of each of their things. So you have a sense that like, oh, there's a cliffhanger, or oh, this person is on to another crime. So there's something to always look forward to. And that's one of the things that actually we see in detective literature, is there's a sense of continuity. In fact, Sherlock was canceled for a couple of years, and Arthur Conan Doyle was like, yeah, I'm not writing anymore. And the people freaked out. And so he killed off Sherlock, but he brought him back to life. He wasn't going to. You'll also notice that both Poirot and Sherlock have someone who is assisting them. We're going to talk more about that in a second, but we're going to move on quickly to just a couple contemporary examples. So I grew up reading The Boxcar Children, which is another form of detective literature, but it's actually written for children. You may have heard of Nancy Drew or the Hardy Boys. They're basically kid detectives. And that's not even to mention the television aspect of detective literature. That has become a huge part of our culture. You can name probably 100 shows that feature different detectives. Okay, we're gonna move on. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Detection Club. So the Detection Club was this group of writers that formed in the 1930s. So we're gonna call this the golden age of detective fiction. So this is actually post Arthur Conan Doyle writing Sherlock Holmes. This is in between the two world wars. But actually, there are forms of the Detection Club still active today. Actually, if you've ever seen Castle, there's a great scene where all the writers of mystery novels are meeting together and they're talking, and another example of writers getting together. So actually, in fact, if you want to be a famous writer one day, my suggestion is find some people who are also passionate and work with them, collaborate. The Detective Club, or Detection Club, sorry, they were very interesting people. So the first president ever was G.K. Chesterton. He's the guy that wrote Father Brown. And Agatha Christie was also a participant in it for years and years. And essentially, they would come together, support each other, brainstorm, and they also created a set of laws or rules, or they called them the 10 Commandments of the Detection Club. This was supposed to be the way that you could write good detective literature. This is what you're supposed to do. So I'm going to get to those commandments in a second and let you look at them. But I want to show you, in order to join this club, you had to, 1, be a writer, but 2, you had to give an oath. So that oath was, do you promise that your detectives shall well and truly detect the crimes presented to them by using those wits which it may please you to bestow upon them, and not by placing reliance on or making use of divine revelation, feminine intuition, mumbo-jumbo, jiggery-pokery, coincidence, or act of God? What do those things mean? Well, we'll get to that in a second, because these are some of the 10 Commandments. They wanted their detectives to truly solve the mystery and also give their readers a fair chance of solving them at the same time. So there are 10 of them, so I'm not going to go through them all, but they are hilarious and also kind of genius. So even modern day detection clubs actually use a list somewhat like this. So let's just take a peek at a couple of these. For example, number 3, not more than 1 secret room or passage is allowable. So, the authors don't want to like totally confuse their readers. Number 5, for example, this one's a little bit crazy. So it says, no Chinaman must figure into the story. There was a trope at this time because of the racism towards the Chinese population. You could always just make the bad guy Chinese. And that was a cliche. And they were like, well, don't always make the Chinese guy the villain. You could say the same thing about American television right now. A lot of times we have a Russian person or someone from the Middle East. That's our villain. Number 9 is the stupid friend of the detective. The Watson must not conceal any thoughts which pass through his mind. So you can see the influence on these writers from Sherlock. It's important in many cases to have someone who's assisting, because that assistant helps the reader solve the mystery. They ask the questions that help the detective get out of their own head. Or even the Scooby-Doo one, the criminal must be someone mentioned in the early part of the story. There's a joke that always the first person you meet in Scooby-Doo who's not one of the main characters is that one that's actually the crime committer. The criminal, that's what we call them. So guys, I hope this was interesting to you. Please enjoy reading The Murders in the Rue Morgue. It's a great story. It will start off unexpectedly, so don't worry if it seems even a little bit boring. You're like, where's the murder? He is explaining the way that the detective works for a reason, and that reason is why I'm having you read it, because it tells you the basis of all these other detectives. And then please enjoy watching a television show. It's great. Your homework is to watch TV. And on that note, goodbye. Love you. See ya.